Hey Dave, this is a follow-on to the last video. Anybody else? I'll post a link to it below if you're interested. As far as interpreting Jesus, he's part of a monomyth. So that is the case, but there's very specific material that is in there. It's not simply an adventure for entertainment. It is not at all, or for worshiping. It is built on a template that is designed for how we came about and how we heal. And that is like other myths and religions, if people know what it is. It's really the way the story is packaged that make it different. So understanding that, we understand everything that we're reading is analogous. Every bit of it, no matter what. All the cities, things like that have been destroyed, all of that, regardless of whether or not they even exist in history, doesn't matter. They're just grabbing local components and making the stories up. That's how the myths are made. The Mediterranean, Crete don't exist because Jason sailed there. They're making up stories utilizing components that are in their culture that people know and that they're aware of. So it makes sense to them as they're doing it. So the same thing is happening here. When they make up that story, people will look and go, there's the story. It's sacked right over there. Meanwhile, what we know is that the 7 times and 7 priests and all that are indicative of this healing process that we're supposed to go through, and that this building that needs to be destroyed represents our early self, because it's always going to be on that template. Our world needs to be destroyed. Our city of evil needs to be destroyed. Our earlier self, we need to get away from our past, from our pharaoh, from our uncle who had the field first. We need to get it back from our family that has it, as in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna needs to go get it, and he's with Lord Krishna. And all of those are all on that same template right there. All of them are representing that. When we get to Jesus material, it's exactly the same, except that suddenly it takes on a flavor in the population that is so radically different that people that are very, well, let's just say some people are very aggressive about certain things. So if I'm going through an adventure in a Greek myth, so I say Zeus is my higher awareness, and Jason represents my consciousness, and crossing that river and meeting Pelias means I've turned inward, and I'm now meeting up with my early self, and then I'm going to struggle to leave the past and all of these things, and then cross through the clashing rocks for the final big destruction and all of that, going into the dangerous places, and seeing that parallel with Moses going through the Red Sea and going into the desert. At some point, these are okay for me to look at and understand and talk about. But when you get into the Jesus material, suddenly it works this way. God is my higher awareness. Jesus is my consciousness, everybody's consciousness. If you use this material to turn inward, you have to understand that the only way to interact with it is that your early conscious self is Jesus, God is the higher awareness, Christ is yourself after you have gone through the healing process, after you have had a spiritual rebirth, as it were. That is not okay to talk about in public. People don't like to hear that, and they can become very aggressively, they can really treat you like something that is very horrific as you're simply trying to understand something that steps into a supernatural realm that they have painted in place that is so significant that if you put yourself into that, they can't figure out what you're doing. It can be a touchy place to be going into the Jesus material. The thing is, I can logically look at it and say, okay, I see how I'm component parts of these. They're not real. They're representative, analogous mental hierarchical components that I can follow that fits the criteria of other material. That's all I mean. Somebody like that is going to say, oh, you think you're God, or you think you're Jesus. And you're like, no, that is not at all. But they're thinking God and Jesus is a real entity that's coming back. It's not the same thing. It's not going to work. However, I think for the seeker that understands the terms are analogous and works to interpret them, something different emerges. Although it is simple to understand, I think that there's some thick stuff in there. That part of John in the beginning is almost like a little bit of like a Lao Tzu starting off like a creation. It's not really like a creation, but setting up conditions that, everything is pure, but it comes from one place. Know that it's not pure. It all comes from one place. It doesn't state that it's pure, but there's a word that it shows a picture of how we come about as a person when it's interpreted, but in verbiage that's pretty thick. To place yourself into that story, because that's exactly the template that it's made on, is just not okay for some people. So anyway, I just wanted to say that when you're reading through that and you're trying to understand it, 100% of it needs to be interpreted, and God is the higher awareness, and whoever is the person that is the chosen person, regardless of what you're reading. If you become Jesus in this case, that's it. Jesus is you. That's tough to talk about. As you're doing it on your own, think about that as you're trying to interpret that. Sometimes Jesus material is much easier. You know, when he's destroying a tree that doesn't produce figs, that's not a real thing. That's a mystery. What grows from my garden? Remember, all of it happens not in a conscious level, but in a level of memory. So then every word is what? What is emerging from my memory? What is emerging from my garden? Is it good or is it bad? Thistles or fruits? That if he is destroying a tree that is not producing figs, what he's doing is getting rid of things in his life or his mental space that are worthless. Life is short. We take on a lot of stuff sometimes that are wasteful that we think later, I wish I wasn't doing this. I hate this. And I don't mean things that we're responsible for. We need to be okay with that. I'm talking about taking on people that are like, just taking advantage of you all the time and things like that you go, God, I've got to step away from this. It's hurting me. That's what that represents, that teaching right there. There's a lot of teachings in here. Forgiving the odd against your brother, to leave your gift at the altar. That's so simple. If you're looking for a better life and you realize you've got stuff up here that's not resolved, stop looking for the better life, because this is what's going to happen. You're going to live through the mote in your eye. If you forgive the odd against your brother at the level of memory, then life automatically flows better. That becomes the teaching right there that becomes very evident and simple to interact with if you go directly to Jesus' work. But all of the pieces and parts, the daughters, every person that's in here, as you go through and read where Jesus is healing or doing things like that with, it's all working out in here. The characters, all of it, are part of are layered parts of the human psyche, and it becomes very thick to get there. Typically in the stories, there's going to be some kind of a reconnection with the queen or something like this, a beautiful woman as you're going on this adventure, which represents the reconnection with the inner self. When you get to Jesus, what do you have? There's Mary, but you've also got his mother. So there's some female interactions that are taking place. And when those take place, those represent, they take the place of your bundle of memories. Instead of it being the wife, it might be the mother or something like that. But Jesus is the consciousness. There's slight variations in that one. Where other ones you've got to cross a threshold and leave the past behind because the past, cyclical pain. Here we've got something different going on. John the Baptist represents the person who is teaching the Bible. It would be like the Pharisee, the person who's teaching the Bible at face value. Or the Pharisee is like a dog is, The Pharisee is like a dog in the manger, for neither does he eat nor does he let the others eat, or something like that. That's a Aesop's fable from much older. The dog guarding the food and doesn't eat. He doesn't go eating, and he doesn't let the cattle eat either. I mention that one, though, because it's also a Gospel of Thomas verse. What that represents is the idea is that there's something in here to consume. There's something in this material that is not understood. And when I'm teaching it to you at face value, I am the person that is teaching you what? I'm not teaching you what I'm teaching you from outside the narrow gate. I'm teaching you from a perspective of John the Baptist. If you're the person that turns in through the narrow gate, that represents, okay, now I'm going to turn inward. I'm going to cross that threshold. That's turning inward. And I leave John behind. The baptism represents the crossing of that threshold. And then John gets left in the past like Pharaoh gets left in the past. This is going to be very hard for people to see, but I can make these connections now. This is going to link up conceptually in Genesis right off the bat, when we've got Abram and then Abraham. When Abraham is called, Abram gets left in the past. Here we have the idea that I am at first John the Baptist, which means I am the person that believes in the material. However, I've stopped and went, oh, wait a minute. There's something different in here. It's an inward path. It's not an outward path. I've been teaching the outward path as John the Baptist. I'm now going to turn inward, stop listening to other people, and find the encoded messages in here that are for me to follow if I'm one of the chosen people. At that moment, I cease to become John the Baptist and become Jesus. In the same way, in Genesis, Abram ceased to become Abram and became Abraham. there's a transition of person that happens right there. That's a hard to see motif, but when you play it out in the psyche, you realize that's exactly what it is. When you understand that it's iterations of you. And now that you are on the inward path, you become Jesus in this case. And when you finally achieve enlightenment, you're going to become the Christ. This is the only way you can explain how Jesus tells his disciples at some point that I will return before some of you even taste death. Here it is much longer later, thousands of years, 2,000 years, he's not here. Physically, he's not. But if you understand that every time somebody finds their nirvana, their inner peace, they find their Buddha nature, you realize that's what's happening here. Christ returns every time somebody finds the kingdom of heaven within. So the way I see the Gospels with John the Baptist in there, then this is all part of this. John the Baptist represents early self. Pharaoh represents a part of early self. While Moses was called the whole time and was there coexisting with, we've got this inner conflict. It's like Cain and Abel, except that they're both continually living until they have to split and go their separate ways. So the division is there of early self, and the one that is the evil element has to be left behind. When we get to Jesus, it's not an evil element. What it is an element that has the material but doesn't understand the material. They're teaching it as a supernatural teaching as opposed to understanding that there is something contained within it that is a personal teaching up here. And that as long as they're listening to people preach, John would have been the blind leading the blind, where Jesus now is going on the inner path. So when you become Abraham from Abram, that represents the time you're called. When in this material, when we become Jesus from John the Baptist, you become Jesus, that represents the same point. Abraham got called, Jesus, you got called. They didn't get called. Both of them are you all the way through. We go from Abram to Abraham. We go from John the Baptist to Jesus. That's the transition that's happening. Pharaoh represented an unaware self. John represents a unaware self, but a self that is teaching the Bible as if the outer shell of it, as if the religion is true. Now Jesus is going to go on the inner adventure, totally cryptic. And all of his, get a red letter edition maybe or something like that, or find all of his quotes and pick those apart. That's an easy, that's a fun thing to do. Paying attention to things like that numbering system that I've got with the 40s on there, and understanding that right after the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they spend 40 years in the desert, a devoid place, 40 devoid. And then right after Jesus is baptized, he spends 40 days in the wilderness, 40 devoid. 40 devoid. Days, years, doesn't matter. What matters is the 40 is an encoded number for pure state. Spending the time necessary devoid, away from, you know what, I got a habit. I got something going on. I got to get away from it long enough to break away from it. So this has to happen to begin with. Temptation is there, and you got to beat the temptation. Right after Buddha gets his enlightenment, Mara the tempter. Right after Jesus spends his time in the desert, Satan tempts him. You see that repeating motif culturally, cross-culture, but conceptually. This is where people would look at that and go, those are not the same. But if you look at them conceptually, you go, damn it, same template. Different story, different flavor. Here, take a look at this one, and we have to talk about something. There's a motif in here. There's several motifs, but there's one that we need to talk about that's going to be helpful because it's going to be the disciples. Who are those? If it plays out in the psyche, what are we talking about here? We've got Jesus is called as the Son of God, has supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked disciples, that's it, and seeks the kingdom of heaven within. Jason is called as the rightful ruler, has Hera for supernatural powers, travels with the Argonauts, and seeks the golden fleece. King Arthur is called as the only one who could extract Excalibur, has Merlin for supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked knights, and seeks the Holy Grail. When we get down to Luke for Star Wars, he's called as the son of Vader, has the Force for supernatural powers, travels with special select rebels, and seeks to save the Alliance. Now this is from the Joseph Campbell template. There's more to the template than what was used there. But in this case, we're looking for just something in common. First of all, there's going to be somebody, Jesus, Jason, King Arthur, Luke. Somehow, they are isolated out of the crowd. In Jewish material, all of the prophets fit this category. And you're going to find that they're selected out by somehow being special, elect, upright, righteous, those sorts of things before God, that there's somehow this person is special above other people. They're not like anybody else. Okay, you're going to have that kind of an element. They're going to have supernatural powers or access to supernatural powers. All of them are going to have that as a component part. Now, what this represents is this: Jesus, Jason, King Arthur, whoever, this is who the template is built upon. If you're going on the path, this is you. I am this person. I'm King Arthur. I am Jesus. I am Jason. I am Luke. You're called as the person that's going to do this. You're a rare individual for whatever. You're the rightful ruler of the kingdom. You're the one that's supposed to be in charge of your house. Okay, and we all have a destination: the kingdom of heaven within, the golden fleece, the Holy Grail, and saving the alliance. All are about the destruction of the bad and having the pure left over at the end, the pure state. Supernatural powers represents this knowledge right here. Nobody has supernatural powers. What you have to know is what happened. How did I come about? How am I a part of my memories? Why do those memories keep acting out? If I resolve what is this forgiveness? What I have to do, I can't stop what happened. I can't stop what happened. I have to change the way I view what happened. I have to find some way to affect the way that I am holding the perception, because that perception is what gives it its power. How strong and how bad I feel about it. How shameful, how angry, how whatever I feel about it is what gives it its power. And the more I think about it, the stronger it gets. Supernatural powers is knowledge of all of that stuff, and that you're going to go and work on those things. That's what that really is. So what are the disciples, the Argonauts, the knights, and the rebels? If you go through and you read through, you'll see that they vary in each one. But basically what they represent is in each author's eyes is something that is a representative of qualities, inner qualities. So you're going to have balance, you're going to have fairness, you're going to have the hot-headedness, you're going to have doubts. That's your Judas. You're going to have these are the qualities when you're reading the stories. Take a look at that. If you're trying to figure out where the disciples go, that's what the disciples are. And you're showing your disciples, you're the one telling your inner qualities, hey, here's how you do it. And they're marveling because they're looking at you going, hey, we're screwed up in here. What are you going to do? When you get into Greek myth, you'll find like the Argonauts or something, people that can play music, that can soothe something. You would think about, what is that inside? This is, I've got something coming up. I've got to be able to resolve it and soothe it and settle it back down. The Gospel of Thomas has one, I'll paraphrase again, but lets you know, tells us that if you know that the strong man is coming, practice before it gets there. And then when the strong man comes, defeat it. When you know that this cyclical thing is going to happen, you make preparations for it. You're bringing along qualities and characteristics. You've got it there. You don't just act this stuff out continuously and going, I don't know why I did that. At some point you have to go, okay, something is going on here that I need to interact. I got to stop this. And since it's coming up and I know it's coming up, let me process with this other person what I can do to create an alternative. And when it comes up, let's focus on that alternative. Let's do something different. So you're really working on psychological processes here that are held in ways of, let me play some music and soothe the frequency. And it's, it's very old stuff. Different authors, again, using their own ways of describing it. I'm going to change the frequency of something. I'm going to heal something. Same thing. I'm going to defeat an enemy. That's an inward enemy. I'm going to sit until something is healed. Same thing. You're defeating an enemy or sitting till you're healed. It's resolving the pain. It's resolving the sin. The sin is the process of holding the negative energy. When you resolve that, you stop experiencing that, and life stops flowing through that as a part of you. Look at them and you'll see that at some point, boy, the verbiage is just magically all over the place, holding conceptually the ideas that are the same thing. It's up to you as the consciousness to come in and make the choice. That's weird when you read the Bhagavad Gita. That's what Arjuna is going to do battle, and Lord Krishna, can only drive the chariot. He can be there as the advisor only. What does that tell us? You can't just live in the higher awareness. You have to use the higher awareness to defeat the past. You have to resolve. You have to forgive. That's what that is. And then that changes your life. Ultimately, with the one about Arjuna, though, you get the idea that, you know what, the consciousness is the one that's in the driver's seat making the decisions. You can get to the higher awareness, but you can't just sit there as the consciousness saying, I don't feel good. Higher awareness, would you please step in and wipe things out? It won't do that. You are still in the driver's seat. You have to engage with the higher awareness and the memories and the emotion of them simultaneously in order to heal. You can't escape it. This is telling us you're in charge. Your consciousness, you have to go through it. You got to drive the boat. Some of it sounds pretty weird. Always say that I am that. I am that wineskin. Wine is life. I am that jacket. The patch is what I'm covering, trying to cover something up with. That's always going to be the theme. You're going to see transitions that are weird, like how come your disciples don't wash your hands when, pharaohs do? And he goes on and says, something about the bride chamber, and he never answers about the washing the hands. He goes on and says something different, and that's where the wine skin and the jacket comes into play as well. So you look at things like that and go, this is a transition from outward to inward. There's a clue right there. He's asking something about the physical world. He's being asked about the disciples, but the answer is something that is not related. Watch those. That means it's not about the physical, it's about the spiritual. Now I become the wineskin. I become, the wedding chamber is up here. And as long as the guests are there, as long as my memories are there, I don't get a marriage of my conscious to my subconscious. This conflict is going on. They're just going to be bam, 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 just like that. And if you think about it deep enough cryptically, maybe he is answering the question, actually. He's not telling you how to wash your hands, though. He's telling you how to wash your soul. That you can't put your new life into your old self. You can't put new wine into an old wineskin. You must have a new wineskin. We've got to heal first before we put new life into ourselves. So in a way, that he's kind of letting us know that washing the soul is more important than washing the hands when it comes down to it. That the hand washing ritual, I don't know whether he's saying it's a bad thing. I don't think so. But what I think he's saying is that's not sufficient. Even the temple, you've got the holy and the holy of holies. There's I don't recall the one where you have to rent the curtain between and open it all up or something like that. It's really, we've got a spot in here that we hide away. This is not getting out. This part right here, no, that's it. That right there that's the world that needs to be destroyed. That is Sodom. So there's going to be this common motif where you have to go defeat your family to get your land back, or go defeat your uncle to get your land back, or in Jewish material with Exodus, what we see, instead of going and getting your land back, you're leaving the past behind and you're going to get land that is promised to you, that is yours. You're going to the promised land. But the same concept is there. This is the promised land. You have a place where it's promised for you to live. And all of those represent, right in the beginning, it represents going back and saying, my mind is, I'm not doing what I want to do. Somehow, my mind is not functioning. It's got too much in there, and too many things are happening, and I need to somehow weed, sort, and process in such a way that my life settles down. I've got to learn to understand some things that I'm hanging on to. So I need to get that back. When we get to Jesus, we're going to find that it's time to go get your vineyard back, and the struggle it is to get that. If you read it in the Gospel of Thomas, it's when will we see the kingdom, and when you become like children and remove your garments and put them under your feet. Oh yeah, somehow it was when the owners of the field came back, and that's how so then you will see the kingdom, or something to that nature, of that nature. I'm paraphrasing. But what is that? When you become like children, when you become like early self again, pure self, and take off your garments, remove all the pain, the shame, put them under your feet. I've resolved them. I am now standing above them. I've elevated myself over them by having experienced them and then forgiven. and now I know so much more, yeah, whatever, that kind of a thing. So, but in the getting of the back of the vineyard, what happens is there's a struggle. Right there is, you send somebody to go get it, they get beat up. You send somebody else, they get beat up even worse, and you send somebody that finally gets killed. So there's a struggle to get this back. Those are all built into the story. You're going to get, but the vineyard, what is that? That's where you live. That's what Noah built right after the flood. A husbandman built a vineyard and drank from the wine and was naked and feeling good in his tent. What is that? He feels good. He's created new life experience. The vineyard is the new place to live from, and he has a fun experience. He's uncovered. That was a good thing. That was a good thing, not a bad thing. So, yeah, the stories are very cryptic, and they're fun to work with. But that'll help you to understand it, I think, knowing those elements are there. God, the higher awareness, Jesus, yeah, tough to talk about. But if you have questions, I'd be glad to jump in and throw some things in there. Still working on understanding the numbering process. I'm missing something. I don't know what it is. I've got something big, but I see that I don't have it all finalized. It's hard. Anyway. All right. Okay, so it seems to me by the nature of your questions that you're familiar with Christian material and that you're also turning the corner and entering the narrow gate with this material. So I wanted to lay those things out. I think it becomes difficult to make constant videos this way because it really what are you doing? You're basically telling people that are of a different mindset, that look at the material in a very, they worship the material. So you come along and say, well, the way this works is that God is the higher awareness and I am Jesus myself and you're Jesus. And when we find enlightenment, we become Christ in the same way that Siddhartha became the Buddha. And then he's going to live in nirvana, which is a mental place. And we're going to live in the kingdom of heaven within, which is a mental place. That it's really the same thing, but it's held in different verbiage. But that a Buddhist can work that stuff around. A Christian believer is not going to like to hear that. That's not going to be okay for them to hear. They can't unwrap from what you're doing versus what they believe. So this is going to have to, this is kind of like, it's tough to talk about this at a very deep level. But if you are researching and you're going through and using the material to take the path, that's what you need to know. And you know what? I just said it's tough to talk about this at a deep level. It is not. What I mean is it's tough to talk about it at a deep level in a forum like this where you're just posting videos and can't really have a conversation. This is for the campfire, isn't it? This is sitting around the campfire chatting here. Anyway, okay, hope that was helpful. And if you do have any questions, go ahead. I'll go ahead and approach it. And the channel's pretty small. I don't, I'm okay with what's going on. So anyway, hope it was helpful. Put yourself in a story. I am that I am. 100%. This belongs in the bundle of memories. That's where these stories play out. But they tie to the life experience. And you, if you become the person that turns inward, if you can put yourself into your consciousness into the position of the called hero, your consciousness, your higher awareness is the God or the supernatural help that you get along the way, the inner qualities that you're fighting, all of that are a part of the story. The disciples, all of that it was a time when civilization was booming and there's no technology yet. What are you going to, this would be good for hundreds of thousands, millions of people. This is their technology right here. We're not even tapping it. All right. But this one has something else going on in there too, so you got to be careful with it. All right. Hope that's helpful. Take care. Ask any questions.